The Adult Ballet Studio is a podcast featuring conversations with the empowering voices of the adult ballet community, a world where passion has no limits and dreams can take flight. My name's Elizabeth Blossfield, and I'm an adult ballet dancer and your host. Welcome to the studio. Happy Tuesday, everybody, and welcome back to the Adult Ballet Studio. I can't wait for you to hear from our guest for this episode. It was such a pleasure to talk to her. Leigh Brockman Horowitz is a certified ballet and character dance teacher who's been teaching dance for more than 20 years. She's taught pretty much every age range from young kids, teens, college students, all the way to adults. And in addition to being a ballet instructor, she's also a classroom teacher and a mom. A lot of her work in ballet is very science-driven. She has a background in Vaganova and has spent a lot of time studying the science of body and brain development. It was fascinating to dive into her research-based approach to teaching, whether it's in a traditional classroom or a ballet studio. Leigh is currently based in St. Louis, where she teaches adult ballet. She served as a faculty member at the Center of Creative Arts in St. Louis and in the ballet department at Loyola University in her native city of New Orleans. Leigh has made it her mission to spread the knowledge of ballet and make it as accessible as possible. And one of the ways she does this is through her social media content. In fact, you might know her on Instagram as Sassy Southern Ballet Mama. I love this Instagram handle. It's how I discovered her great work too. And through Instagram Reels, she shares tips for ballet dancers to improve their technique and to understand ballet's history and how the art form is evolving. A lot of her content focuses on how the ballet world can accommodate and become more accepting of neurodivergent dancers, something she knows well as someone with a family history of ADHD. We discussed her focus on mental health in the ballet studio and how teachers can create a classroom that accommodates all types of learners. We also discussed her journey with her physical health after receiving a diagnosis for multiple sclerosis in 2018, and what that has not only meant to her personal experience of ballet, but also how it's informed her teaching, especially in the adult ballet community. It was a fascinating conversation. I learned a ton during this episode, and I hope you will too. Check out what Leigh had to say. I'm really glad to meet you. I'm so excited to be talking to you. I love, your work and everything that you're doing with your studio. So I have a lot of questions for you.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm so excited. Thank you for having me. I'm really honored.
So I guess just to start off, for anybody who doesn't know or isn't familiar with your work, could you just give a little bit of an overview of the work that you do as a dancer and an instructor?
Currently, I run adult ballet classes in St. Louis, Missouri. It was a very winding road to get to that space. But now that I'm here, I'm hanging on with two hands and I don't want to let go. So I do a lot of work with adults from every background that you can imagine. We do a lot of scholarshiping work. So we do some fundraising and offering a lot of different avenues for dancers to express themselves. So whether that's during offering intensives during the year, workshops during the year, starting a company, and then also having performances throughout the year. So, and then just in classes as well. So a lot of different things for adult ballet dancers, just trying to get the world to see that, adult ballet dancers have stories to tell and are beautiful artists in their own right. So giving them a platform to have that work out there.
Yes. Yeah. I love the work that you're doing. And you mentioned starting your company. I can't wait to ask you about that too, because that's exciting. And I know on your website, it says, you kind of mentioned this a little bit, but it says that your ballet teaching style is rooted in history, but it also springs from 21st century teaching practices and sort of forward thinking. So could you talk a little bit more about how you sort of seek to honor ballet's history in your teaching, but also move it forward into the 21st century as well?
Sure. So I'm actually a classroom teacher on top of being a ballet teacher. And I think that absolutely informs who I am in the studio in a way that doesn't always come forth for teachers who are in the studio only. And because, right, as a teacher, I have to go through professional development and continuing education constantly. So,
Right.
And my area of expertise is actually in early education. And so child development, how the brain works, neurology, like all of those things are just of special interest to me anyway, because of that work. And I find that it dovetails in the studio every year more and more and more and more and more, and how I respond to dancers and how I want to train dancers and how I want to approach dancers, whether they're adult or youth dancers, right? It's really, I think, imperative that we honor our traditions. I am rooted in Vaganova, and so for those of you who don't know, it's the Russian-based method of ballet, and there is a long tradition there, right? So I absolutely honor the traditions that come out of ballet, or specifically Vaganova, and that style of ballet. But I do think that the best way to honor that tradition, because Vaganova herself was a forward-thinking, scientifically, her mind was research-based, was scientifically based. So I think she would be very much like, what is today? And that is the bar we need to hit. So for me, doing what I do as far as what do we know about brain development? What do we know about how we treat and how we respond to human beings on a scientific level is exactly what she would be doing anyway.
Yeah, that crossover is so interesting to me. The crossover from the work you do with early childhood education into ballet. And to me, I've taken one Vaganova workshop. I mostly studied Balanchine, and the studio I take at now is very classical. And I found it so difficult. It was really tough for me. So I think it's impressive anybody who teaches or can do that style of ballet.
Yeah, well, that was, we might get into it later, but that was absolutely part of my journey. Was I was not trained in Vaganova as a child. Really kind of, I guess, like American mutt more than anything, and heavily influenced by my early years, which were from a teacher who studied in the 20s with Paris Opera Ballet. And so I had that influence in my training. And I would say more than anything, probably Cicchetti. I really stayed in that lane until I was about 20. And then everything changed.
That's amazing. Yeah, well, I can't wait to get into that a little bit, but I just want to kind of rewind because I know you mentioned you study early childhood education. You have some big interest in sort of like brain development and child development and things like that. So how did you become interested in that? And, what sort of led you down that career path, and how does it kind of translate to the work that you're doing now?
Sure. Well, I went to school and got my BA in English. And the entire time, I was doing different forms of dancing, but I wasn't actually training in ballet at that time. Or took like one or two classes, but it wasn't, I was doing swing dance, competitive swing dance and those kind of things at that time, because in my era, that's what was, swing kids was like the thing. And so I was doing all kind of swing dancing, and I went to school in Fredericksburg, Virginia, which is very close to Washington, D.C. So there was a lot of crossover on training and things like that there, and opportunities to dance in that time. And so my idea was always that I was going to teach. Since I was a little itty bitty, that's what I wanted to do. I would be in my garage, playing teacher with whoever would come and sit with me. I always thought, well, teaching's what I'm going to do. So after college, I actually spent 3 years in Washington State on the Colville Indian Reservation, and was doing teaching there primarily in early elementary, but hitting everything kind of K through 8 as well in those years. And then my last year, I did a ton of substitute teaching and got a really good feel about like where I thought when I went home, what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be. Unfortunately, when I did go home, I was completely burned out. And I was like, I can't go back into the classroom. I've got to find something else. I can't do this. That's a whole different story, but I needed some time off. And so I really did flip to teaching mostly in studios at that point. And a lot of my studio teaching was in early years, pre-professional university, but never adults. But it was with youth students, in other words, versus adult students. And when I was thinking about going back into the classroom, this is right before my kiddo was born. So he's 8 now. I was retiring from dancing completely. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had been in and out of schools with dance for different programs that pushed into schools. And so I never really lost my contact with being in classrooms, but it was more as a push-in than it was as a classroom teacher. And I was like, well, what do I do? Do I want to go back to elementary? Do I want to, what do I want to do? Well, my kid's turning, is going to be here, and maybe I should look at early years. And so I started doing some research on early years. I started like, what do I need to do to get myself up to where, things have changed in the past 20 years? What do I need to do to relearn what I, need to learn to be able to teach today? And so I started doing that. And then we moved to St. Louis. And for my husband's job, I had already done some of the homework on getting myself started back in early years. And I hit the ground running when we got to St. Louis. I mean, almost immediately was back in the classroom and have not left the classroom since then. So,
Oh, that's great.
yeah.
I love that story. It definitely sounds like it's the right path for you, and it's cool how it all came full circle. And so I know that you mentioned you started teaching sort of youth dance and youth ballet. So how did you become interested in teaching adults specifically, or what led to that shift as well?
Yeah, so I taught at Loyola University in New Orleans for 16 years. Many hats there. Teaching, stage managing, adjunct faculty for the college side. I wore every hat imaginable. Choreographer. Probably the only thing that I didn't do was seamstress. Like that was.
Oh,
I
wow,
can't.
that's amazing.
I can sew point shoes, but that's about it. I can put a button back on something. I really did everything else under the sun that could possibly be done in the program, and I had taught university students, but and I would say young adults who had just graduated from the university who were still dancing with us. The Loyola Ballet program at the time had a recreational program, or a community program, because it really wasn't recreational. It was for serious students who wanted to perform. And so that was a community program. And a lot of our university students went into that program when they graduated, and they were still in the New Orleans area and they still wanted to dance. So I taught those classes as well. So in that way, I would say I taught young adults, but they were coming out of the university experience. So they were really like still my university students,
Right.
And then I got so my entire career there was early years and teenagers. I mean, it's everything that I taught pre-professional kids, recreational kids. I taught in dance studios. That's everything that I did. So when I got to Coca, which was in St. Louis, which is a big studio here in St. Louis, I was going actually as a student. I had just had my kid. We had just moved to a city where we had no connections, no family, no friends. And I was like, well, you know what? This is it. I'm going to take a ballet class for me. I haven't done that in, 5 years. It'll be nice just to get back in the studio and move. And pretty immediately, the teacher there who was teaching the adult ballet class at the time, she was like, listen, you obviously are not just the random adult ballet student who comes off the street. You know what you're doing.
Right.
And I want to talk to you about that. And I was like, no, I'm here to take class. No.
Don't try to lure me to a job.
Right, no, you will not do that to me. So I got one semester in St. Louis without teaching. Didn't last very long. And at the time, they really needed a character teacher, and that's the other side of my life besides ballet. And it's probably the biggest part of my life is character dance and folk dance. And they needed a character dance teacher because the teacher who was teaching it didn't feel like she had enough background to do it justice. So that's how I started at that studio, was really teaching character dance. And then I was in the pre-professional, like immediately it was like, oh, well, you can do that. Then you can teach the pre-professional kids. Oh, because you have that background. Oh, you can do that. Well, you can teach the earlier kid. Like all of a sudden I had a full load, and I was teaching at the preschool as well. So I was teaching during the day from 7:30 to 5. And then I would have like an hour and a half to 2 hours off. And then I would teaching at the studio from 5:30 or 6 until 10 o'clock at night, and so I had a full load. I couldn't do any more than I was doing. And then one of the teachers who was teaching the adult ballet students about 2.5 or 3 years into my time there, her kids were teenagers and she needed time at home. And she begged me, can you please take this one ballet class over? Just take it over, please, Leigh. I can't, I gotta be home with my boys. I was like, I have nowhere else in my schedule to stick a class. But we found it. We found like how we could shuffle the pieces, because no one else wanted to teach her class. None of the other teachers really wanted to take on adult ballet students. They were really into what they were doing with their younger kids. I had never really taught adult ballet students before. And so I was nervous as all get out about taking this class over. And I walked into the studio, and it was the start of a semester. I think it was January. And I had taken over, that we had split it at December, right? You'll walk in and you'll take over the class in January. And I was like, listen, here's the deal. I have never taught adults before. I come from the background of Vaganova Ballet, which is a very methodical scaffolded way of teaching. I have no idea how to teach adults who have come from all different backgrounds and haven't gone through from the beginning with me. And I am ambitious, and I am critical, and I have that eye because I've been teaching students who wanted to go on stage or wanted to work as professionals for the past 16 years of my life. And I don't know how to undo those eyes. If that's what you want, let me know. Otherwise, let's talk about, go through a couple of classes with me, and then let me know if you feel like what I'm doing is good, more, less, and we can just kind of take it a class at a time until we find our rhythm. They were down for that. I was like, but, come back and let me know what you think. So the next class they came in, and there was a couple of, ideas floated around. And I was like, okay, so I tailored the class to that. And then the third class they came in, it was like the dam broke. And they were just, we don't want to do this anymore. We're like this. We don't want to be considered recreational students. We spend our money, we spend our time, we are leaving our families to come do this, and no one is correcting us. They think we're just here to have fun, and we are not. So if you tell us that you have to break us back down from the beginning in order to train us correctly, then that's what we want to do. And you could have knocked me off of my stool with a feather. I had no idea. I had no idea. And I was like, are you sure? Because that means we're going to have to go all the way back to two hands at the bar, and we're going to have to undo and redo what needs doing. Are you sure that's really what you want to do? And they said yes. And so we started. And here we are 6 or 7 years later, and we have not stopped. It's the same core group of students that are still with me and have gone now through the training from the beginning of the curriculum up through it. We have beginners now. We have other people who've come in, and have filled out the community. But it's really that core group is still that core group. They are just some of the most dedicated people I know. And so I very quickly, once COVID hit, realized that I wanted to spend my time, as much as I love my youth students, I was tired of it. I didn't want to be in that world anymore. It's cutthroat. It's hard. I wanted out. I had found something that was like a little gem that no one knew about. Like, no one knows about these adult ballet dancers. Like, why would I know? This is where I'm going to put all my attention now.
I love that. That's such an inspiring story. I love that the same core group of dancers has been with you, from the very beginning of you starting to teach that class. And I think it really speaks to, the lack of resources that's, existed in the ballet space for adult dancers, because I've taken classes like that where the teacher gives no corrections because they think you're just here to get, a workout. And some people don't want that. Some people want to be pushed. And I think it's great that you asked, because I wish more teachers would ask what the adults want. And I think it's great that they advocated for themselves and said, this is, the type of education in ballet that we're looking for.
They continue to advocate for themselves. Yeah. Because I'm still tentative. Like, I don't know if this is really what you want to do. I mean, but everything from intensives to workshops, or workshops to intensives to movie nights to you name it, the ballet company, all of it has been them saying to me, I think it's time for us to do this. I think that's what we want to do next. And so I just kind of follow their lead, which is very in line with my early childhood life, right? So I'm a director right now, but I'm a play-based, teacher who follows, it's called the Reggio inspired teaching. And it's very much about observing where your students are and then following and supporting those needs. So that's pretty much how I do my ballet life too. I observe where my students are. I might throw out a couple of suggestions to see if they're interested or what might stick. And I let them come to me and say, we're ready. This is what we're interested in doing. And that's how we just progress. That's how we keep going. The only thing that I have to be really strict about is, the curriculum is the curriculum. So we're going to go through that and do that technique right. But everything else, that's kind of their purview.
You want the technique to be taught correctly, but I love that approach because it's so collaborative and it really brings them into the whole creative process as well. And I think that's a great lead into some of the questions I wanted to ask you, because I know that you have this online persona on Instagram, Sassy Southern Ballet Mama. That's how I discovered you, and I love your videos. You share, advice, tips, lessons about ballet. Some are practical, some are more philosophical, but they're all so great. And so I was wondering, first of all, how that came about and how you're hoping to engage the community of adult ballet dancers. And then I want to get into some of the stuff that you talk about.
Sure. Sassy Southern Ballet Mama was a joke. It was never meant to stick. I started the page just as a way to connect with like my personal friends. And so, all of those monikers are me, right? Like I love Tinkerbell. I've always loved Tinkerbell. She's so sassy. So like, and everybody who knows me in my life has heard me say that so many times, right? She's so sassy. And they're always like, yeah, well, we know why you love her. And so, that was when I was creating the name. I just it was just an Instagram page. It was never supposed to be what it has turned out to be. And it was a wink to my friends, it was a wink to the people in my life. And so that's how the persona came about.
I love that.
Then COVID came, then I was using it for more PR, kind of like, let's connect with a wider community because this is a crazy time that we're all living through. Let's get together. And then it just kind of took off from there. And I don't want to change it now because that's how people know me. So
yeah, why would you? I love that. It started from such an honest place. And I think that's why people connect with it so much. That's awesome. And I know that on that page, you talk about so many different things. And you've spoken a lot about ballet for neurodiversity and how it can be a benefit because of how it caters to the way that neurodiverse brains work. So can you talk a little bit about that and what you've learned?
Oh, absolutely. So again, all of it informed by my classroom side. And I'm ADHD as well. And my child is ADHD, and my entire family, is ADHD. So for me, I think for some people, being neurodivergent or being diagnosed or knowing somebody who's ADHD is kind of still like the stigmatized thing, where it's like, oh, I'm so sorry, or what is that like, or whatever it is, and I guess because I grew up with it, I was not diagnosed till much later. I mean, I was already in my 40s when I was diagnosed, but because everybody in my family has been, my siblings, people have been diagnosed, it's not something that's ever been a stigmatized thing for me. It's just something that we have, and you live and you figure out how to do what you do with it. And I really started noticing in Instagram world, but in the ballet world, I started thinking about my students. I was really connecting what was going on, especially 10 years ago when I started, getting back into educating myself on how to get back into being a classroom teacher. I started really looking at my students at Loyola, and I was like, man, I think, I think that we probably all have a little neurodivergency here. And to everybody's point that has, posted, I talk about ballet with neurodivergency, but honestly, the ballet program was housed in a place that had musicians and had opera singers. And I can honestly say, yes, many other forms of art and sports more than likely house a lot of neurodivergent people. And there's good reasons for that. And so as I was thinking through how does this affect my students who were youth students, and then as I started working with the adult ballet group, I realized that I was looking at a group of humans who, because of the generations in which they grew up, especially women who were not able to be diagnosed. I mean, when they were growing up in the 80s and 90s, or even earlier, for some of my students, people didn't even think ADHD existed. And if they did, it was just like, you had to just, focus more. That's just what you need to do. I could really start seeing in my students, in the way that they learn ballet, that they probably had some undiagnosed neurodivergency, and I needed to be able to teach their brains. So their brains that were unfocused in class, maybe, or their brains who could not pick up choreography or class exercises quickly, or their brains who could not hear music, their brains who could not retain from one class to the next on things that we had talked about. What then did I need to do as a teacher in order to give them the tools that they might not even know that they need? Because we all have coping mechanisms when we're undiagnosed, but when you're doing something brand new, all your coping mechanisms might not work because it's brand new for you. So what, as their teacher, what do I give to them? What can I help them? How can I help them learn in a way that fits each one of their brains? And I think that for me has really brought it all, the past 10 years of thinking about all of this has really crystallized it for me. It's important. It's so important that we recognize that we do have maybe a high percentage of neurodiverse students in our midst. And what does that mean for us as teachers? We can't just keep doing I'm going to put it in air quotes, right? We can't keep doing the traditional things when we know better. We know better now. The science and the research is out there. So as teachers, what do we need to do to advance this? How we are in the studio, how we are with our students. What does that look like? What does it mean? And it doesn't mean throwing away the baby with the bathwater, right? It doesn't mean getting rid of all of our traditions and the things that we do, but it does mean advancing who we are as teachers in the classroom, in the studio, and answering our students' needs.
I think this is such an important topic. I'm really happy that you're focusing on it. And I know, as you said, I think it has been, there's a whole conversation to be had about access to mental health care and how that has sort of delayed these diagnoses for some people. I speak to a lot of friends who didn't get diagnosed until their 30s and 40s, just like you. And I know there's a lot on social media, a lot of talk that's come out recently about neurodiversity in the last few years. And I think it is more prevalent than we've acknowledged in the past. But a lot of people, it is more still stigmatized. Like a lot of people still don't take the time to understand how neurodiverse brains work. And it seems like there's a huge opportunity in ballet, as you said, to sort of cater to that population that's often very creative and very comfortable thinking outside of the box. So I'm curious if you can expand on sort of what you think the ballet community as a whole can do to be more accepting and more understanding of how ballet works with neurodiversity, and also just how to cater to neurodiverse dancers better, whether it's in the studio or on a stage or whatever it is.
First off, I think every ballet teacher needs to take some neurodevelopment, some brain development classes. Until they understand how the brain works, like we have to understand how the body works, right? The brain is just another part of the physical nature that we have to understand of our dancers. So until they understand neurology and the research behind how the brains work of neurotypical people and neurodivergent people, all of this is mud, right? You have to be immersed in it in order to teach it well for each one of your students. So that's A, take some classes, do some research, do some homework. And then get, like you said, get creative. Get creative on how you reach your students. So in my ballet class, I have, I mentioned some of the things, right? I have a student who really can't hear music. So I count everything. I count everything so that she has a metronome to go off of every single time that there is music on. That is one way of offering an accommodation for someone who just literally, because of her brain, cannot hear that. And it doesn't matter how hard she tries. It doesn't matter how many times we've had musicians in to explain music theory. It doesn't matter how many times we've broken music down. It's just not something that her brain will be able to do easily. So in class, when I have to, we're doing different exercises and we're doing them quickly, and I have to be able to do that for her. Other things too, if it's not physically in the studio, other things too. How many ways can we offer our students to learn? And I've written about all of these things, on my Instagram page. But recording is huge. You have to get permission. You have to make sure that it's private, but for students who are visual learners, we have to be able to give them the visual aspect to learn. They're not going to be able to do everything just because you said it to them. They need to watch it, and they need to watch it multiple times. So record, and make it available to your students. For the students who are more tactile, who learn because their bodies need to be touched, or they need to figure out ways to feel it in their bodies, then it's our jobs to, even if we are like a little shy of touching our students, then it's our job to give them that touch in an appropriate way, but to put the body where the body needs to be tactily. So you have to know your students, you have to know what they need, and then you have to be able to go there as a teacher. Offering those things is what's going to advance our dancers, not just keeping to, well, I told you that yesterday, so you should know it today. That's just not going to happen for every student.
And that's such an important point too, because I think there are so many benefits of ballet to, all different types of brains, all different types of dancers, but you really have to pair it with the correct instruction and, the right instructor that knows how to work with you. And I think without the correct, I've been really lucky to work with the instructors that work really well with me and have helped me to learn how to work with my body in ballet. But a lot of dancers don't have access to that. So I'm really happy that people like you are making it much more accessible for, a broad group of ballet dancers. And it goes back to that balance we talked about where, you're embracing tradition, but you're also kind of pushing the art form forward, which is important for it to evolve. So And then I know you also have spoken a lot on social media about being a dancer with multiple sclerosis. And I was wondering if you're okay talking a little bit about that journey as well, you know, the diagnosis and how it changed your approach to ballet, and some of the challenges that you've had to work through and, you know, what you learned from those.
I was diagnosed in 2018 and was scared out of my mind, as you would imagine, pretty initially. I was so scared that I was doing ballet bar in the hospital in the week that I was in the hospital as they were diagnosing me, and doing, you know, things like spinal taps. And, you know, it was like, I need to assure myself that I can still do this. Like, what does this mean to me? And luckily, and I didn't know it, one of the head neuro team members had danced all the way through college and med school. And so she came in and she's like, you know, we're really not supposed to let you do this, but I understand in a level that probably nobody else will. So do it. But if you feel fatigued, you need to lie down. So,
Right.
but I was so grateful for that acknowledgement that I was scared and I needed to make sure that I could still move. So that week was really important to me on the ballet side, because it showed me that even when the worst part of this is here, right now for me, I'm still able to do it. I would say I was really tentative my first year after the diagnosis because I wasn't sure what my body was going to do. I have been very, very, very lucky. My medication is working. I have had knock on wood, I haven't had new lesions in a couple of years. But the doctors, and I have one nurse who I absolutely adore, Mary Kay. If you're listening to this, you're the woman. But they're always surprised that I have the balance and coordination and feeling in my body that I do. And they always say, they're like, you're just so body aware. You're just so body aware. It's ballet. It's my entire life of dancing that has created that. And so I'm very quick to feel like something's not right with my body. So maybe, you know, I need to call in and let them know that something is off. And, you know, we can talk about it and maybe adjust medication, adjust things that need to be adjusted. And that's one way that the ballet and body awareness goes together for me for MS. I think the only thing that I really have found to be a complete struggle, and it's just where the lesions are in my brain, my balance, which I don't think was ever like great. I was never a turner on my right side. I love left turns. And I wonder if that has some, like, maybe this was always kind of in there. I don't know. But I really find that my balance is not what it used to be. And some of that could just be age, because of course with age comes some of those difficulties as well. But I'm not that old yet. So I think it's just where the lesions are pressing. And so do my doctors. They're like, yeah, it's just that is not, we're actually surprised that you don't have more of those issues. So that you feel a little bit of it is yes. But, you know, do your vestibular training, do your proprioceptive training, do the things that you know that will keep that strengthened. I can't, you know, they're like, it's not going to get better, but you can keep it at a plateau. And that's all I want to do at this point, is keep that at a plateau. And it helps me, it informs me on how I talk to my older dancers, because my brain really is probably where, you know, some of my dancers who are 20 years older than me are, right? And so I talk to them about the importance of doing the eye exercises, you know, doing the PT things that we need to do to keep the inner ear and brain strong so that our balance is good enough to continue dancing, right? And can speak to that with all knowledge and experience, because even though I'm much younger than they are, my brain is where it is. And so that's given me a way to even talk to students in a beneficial way. And the other thing that I find that is maybe like a little bit of a hardship is my fatigue level and my fatigue level. I know people are like, no, but you don't seem fatigued. I'm like, that's the ADHD.
Yeah.
But my body is super tired, right?
Yeah.
I know the energy looks like it's all sparkles and unicorns, but that's the other thing. The MS makes my body and my joints, my muscles so tired all the time that I do find I slow down in class. You know, I do have a tendency to maybe be more injured, and injuries last for longer because I can't, you know, I don't want to believe my body's as tired as it is. So I push and then I'm injured. Yeah. And then with the MS, it lasts longer. It takes longer to heal. those are some of the hardships, but again, that's also a way for me to be able to communicate with my students, especially my older students.
Well, I'm glad that you're doing well and that things are being kept at a plateau. And thank you so much for being so open about sharing that, because I think, it is really scary and really challenging, but it's a conversation that needs to be had in ballet. We don't have these conversations enough. So I really appreciate the fact that you're so open about some of those challenges. And I know that you've also spoken about how that diagnosis and sort of living with a chronic illness like that has fueled your drive to see ballet move away from its one size fits all approach and become more accepting. So what would you like to see, change in ballet, and what's some of the work that still needs to happen to sort of get us there?
Oh, I know that's a big one, right?
It is. That's a big question.
I mean, I'm such a researcher, right? My answer is always, everybody needs to educate themselves. That's always where I go. Do the research, go to class, do the learning that we need to do, because I think a lot of times in ballet we might, and that's just a might. We might take some professional development on teacher training. We might go get some certifications over a weekend or do those kind of things. But we don't train anything else but the ballet side. And human beings are not just ballet. Our students are not just ballet. So go take some other classes in ways that can help you develop yourself as a teacher outside of ballet. That's, I think, to me, always the answer that I go to first as far as moving us forward in our ballet world and in our traditions. And I look to places like the Australian Ballet. I look to places like the Royal Ballet. I look to these big programs that have made such strides, with their acknowledgement that, things that we used to do a long time ago, as far as conditioning and physical therapy is concerned, no longer helps, that we have to change the way that we do those things. These big programs that offer counselors now for their dancers, that offer these wonderful supportive ways of being, acknowledging that the dancers and what dancers needs maybe haven't changed, because I think even dancers from eons ago probably needed these support systems, but we are now acknowledging that they need their support systems, and we have the science and the resources to offer it to them. So why are we not offering it to them? And so I think those are the kinds of things that need to be in place. And of course, a lot of our ballet world is top down, so we're going to talk about it at our level so that it comes from kind of bottom up. But as if the more that our bigger schools and our bigger programs are beginning to offer those things, and the more they talk about it, and the more that they let the world know that these are the things that they are doing, I think then we're gonna see the middle ground start shifting, right? There's going to be an acknowledgement that, oh, we really are doing things differently now. So all of us need to be doing things differently now.
I totally agree. That's how those changes need to happen. And I just had a conversation the other day. I can say it because the episode will publish by the time this comes out, but with Aubrey Lynch from American Ballet Theater in New York, and all of the great work that he's doing with American Ballet Theater to prioritize mental health. And as you said, provide counselors and, access to healthcare that isn't just physical, but also mental and emotional for dancers. And I think you're right. The more that big companies like that are doing stuff like that, it really trickles down, and it's exciting to see that some of those changes are happening. And I hope they keep happening, because it's so.
I hope they keep happening, and I have to give a shout out to ABT, because I am certified in ABT, the National Training Curriculum in pre-primary through 5 through ABT, and they were one of the first programs that, when you take the classes, they go through. It's it's a little blurb, and I always wish there's more because of my classroom side, but even the little bit that they did on child development in those classes was amazing, right? That they added that into their full understanding of that's part of the dance curriculum. Was like, I could not bow down enough. I was just so thrilled to see that in there, and grateful that they tested us on it, right? Like, it wasn't just, let me throw that out there and it's just for your perusal. No, we're going to now test you on it, because in order to be a teacher, you need to know these things. That's the level that I want to see everybody hit.
That's so amazing to hear. And that's the level that I hope we get to as well in the ballet world. And I know we talked a lot about your background with teaching and, kind of becoming a ballet instructor as well. But I totally breezed by one of the questions I meant to ask, which is, what was your first introduction to ballet in the first place? Because you've been dancing your whole life, right?
Yeah, since I was 3. My grandma, bless her, I'm the oldest of 4, and I'm the oldest grandchild on all sides. And I don't know if it was just because of that or if she saw something in me. Maybe she saw a little bit of that ADHD and, we need to get her, she's always wiggling and moving. We need to get her into dance classes. I'm unsure at this point what it was, but I know she was the one who said, we need to get Leigh into dance classes. And her neighbor across the street from her growing up was a woman by the name of Joyce Brinkman. And she had a little dance studio, just, a very humble, local dance studio. She'd been around forever. Everybody knew Miss Joyce. And she did for like little ones, for 3-year-olds, she did those combo classes, which so many people talk about, right? A little ballet, a little jazz, a little tap, like honestly, I don't think she did jazz. I think it was ballet and tap at that age. And that was, I fell in love. And around 5 or 6, Miss Joyce and my grandma decided that I did not need to be at her studio anymore, that I needed to be in a more classically oriented studio and really concentrate on ballet. So they sent me to the Leigh Haller Classical School of Ballet, or School of Classical Ballet, which at the time was one of the preeminent schools in New Orleans. New Orleans is not known for its ballet. Okay, we're known for jazz, we're known for opera, we're not necessarily known for ballet, but her school was known, and her daughter was teaching at the time, and so many names have come out of that school, and the names that came out of that school are the teachers who then have students today dancing in all over the world, right? So she really did train not only the next generation, but maybe 2 or 3 generations in New Orleans dancers. And so I was very lucky to have her and to have her daughter teach me my foundations, my roots. And I fell in love with ballet in a way that obviously has never left me through those years from about 6 to 12. I mean, it just was. And if you know anything about the brain, you know that all the neurological pathways are getting cemented from 0 to 7 and then really cemented until 12 and all your emotional brain. So it's not a surprise that when you fall in love with something, it sticks with you for the rest of the life because the pathways are laid. So
I love that everything comes back to research.
It all comes back. So as much as I want to be like, oh, I was in love, I'm like, yeah, my brain was actually set. So it was really important to me. And I think what she offered was character dance. And that was maybe something a little bit different than what other ballet schools offered at the time. And it was, I had never, obviously I was little, I had never done character before, but she started having in all of her summer programs and her summer workshops, at least twice a week, we would have character classes and we would do full, boleros or, Mexican folk dances. One of her ballet teachers was from the Philippines. So I ended up doing tinkling. I was given the opportunity to explore the world through dance in a way that other ballet studios were not doing. And that definitely set my view to what dance could be in a way that was maybe a little bit different than just doing only ballet all the time.
And I think incorporating some of those other styles of dance, as you mentioned, makes you a more well-rounded dancer, and it really elevates your ballet training as well. So that's awesome to hear that you had that support. And we didn't even get into a conversation about your character training. I need another hour with you. I have so many questions.
Yeah, I was super lucky. I was super, super lucky. And I know we probably could do more, but that year, those 16 years at Loyola, the only way for me to get Vaganova in my body was, and it's important for me to tell this story to adult ballet dancers that I was not my adult ballet dancer's age. I was 20, 21 when this was happening to me, or when I chose to have it happen, it didn't happen to me, or maybe a little bit older, 22, 23. And they told me very quickly that I couldn't dance at Loyola University. I couldn't even take classes unless I understood. And if I wanted to teach, I needed to get Vaganova in my body. So I was lucky that I had a job at the time. I switched from teaching. Like I told you, I became a paralegal. At the time, I was just, at the very beginning of my life, I was just a file clerk. And that gave me the flexibility to take classes. They didn't care when the stuff got filed. They just needed it filed when they walked in the door the next day. So I had keys and I had the alarm system and I could go in and file whenever I wanted to, which led me to be able to do classes during the day and classes at night. And so I was taking 2 or 3 classes, beginner classes and intermediate classes with the university students during the day to get the ground of curriculum in my body, and then doing the advanced work for 3 hours at night. So I was dancing for about 6 years for 4 to 5 hours a day, every day of my life, and then 6 to 8 hours on Saturdays. And that was how I managed to get the syllabus and the curriculum into my body. And it took me that long. It took me 6 to 7 years, because it takes 8 years to build a dancer in the best circumstances.
Right.
And I needed to get it in my body very, very quickly. And without the finishing stuff, so I didn't need year 7, year 8, but I needed to get at least through year 6 in their curriculum. So that was huge. And you can't do Vaganova training without character training. It just doesn't exist. You have to have historic dance, you have to have character dance and folk dance, you have to have conditioning, you have to have all the things. And I was lucky. I was very, very lucky that my teachers at the time were able to offer all of that to me. And if they weren't able to offer it to me, they sent me to places where I needed to go to get it. And I fell in love with character training, and I could not have been a professional dancer at that point. That a professional ballet dancer, that wasn't going to be my calling, because it was late. I was late, right, to the game. But I was able to join a company and dance with them for many, many years, tour the world internationally, tour the entire United States, and do folk dance and character dance as a professional job. So I was very, very lucky in that way.
That's amazing. That sounds like an amazing experience, and, so much work and so much dedication. And again, Vaganova is so challenging. And now you started your own company, which I wanted to talk about too, because this is a pretty new initiative. So you have the SSBM company. Can you talk about how that came together, and whether you have any performances coming up, or, what your future plans are for that?
It's my students, they really wanted to, they were ready to perform. Not all of them. Let me be very clear. I have some students who are like, that scares me. And so, we had to negotiate some of those things, but many of them were ready. And it was time. They've been with me for 5 years, 6 years at that point, and they needed to understand why we do the work in class and how it connects to what we do on stage, and why it's important that we do all of what we do, and you have to kind of have that performance experience. You don't have to, but it's much easier to understand classwork if you understand the end game. And so we started working, and it was just going to be a performance. It was a performance last August 2023. It was just going to be a performance. And as we started going through it and feeling how this worked and all of these things, at the end of the time, I was like, listen, would you all want to do more performances more regularly? And is that something that you're interested in doing? And they were like, yeah, I think would really be interested. I said, well, we have to build a repertoire. We don't have a rep. So we would take it like about a year, maybe a little bit over a year, and really build a rep. And then we can maybe do some performances, but we would be a company. Like you'd have to come to classes. You have to like, yeah, let's do it. And so that's how it kind of organically morphed. So we're in the process right now. This is our building year of creating the rep, getting it into our bodies, doing all of that work. I'm actually leaving the directorship of the early childhood program that I'm doing at the end of August. So next year, 2024 to 2025, is like Leigh's year of really building the adult ballet program, where it can go, because it'll be the first time in my entire life where I'm just focusing on that. Just not having 2 jobs or 3 jobs, because when you're dancing, you have to have 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. And so I've never had a time in my life where I haven't had at least 2 or 3 jobs. And this is going to be the first time in my life where I'm honored and privileged to be able to do that, to be in a place financially and all family, familially, to be able to say I can take a year and focus all my energy into ballet and see what happens.
Wow, what a huge accomplishment. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I'm really excited to see what happens with the company. I think, I wish there were more opportunities like that for adult dancers. I know that we're getting there, but it's so cool that you're providing that opportunity for more performances and for those dancers to get what they, asked for, which is amazing. I know you're on spring break right now from the studio, so I want to be aware of your time. I don't want to keep you for too long.
It's okay.
We do have one last section on the podcast called Petit Allegro. It's just like rapid fire questions, if that's okay with you.
I love this section.
Well, I'm curious. I always kind of start off asking, whether you're teaching or, taking class or whatever it is, what's one item that you have to have in your ballet bag at every class?
Just one. Um, okay, so on the dancer side, I have to have resistance bands because that's how I warm up. I have to have those. But on the teaching side, I have to have either gum or cough drops because we talk a lot.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, that's an underrated thing. You need like a lozenge or something. And then I know you mentioned that you've toured all over the world with the company that you used to dance for. Do you have a favorite ballet that you've either performed in or, seen live?
So many. So ballet specifically.
Or any dance. It could be any dance.
Yes. Okay. I are you familiar with Stoneflower, the ballet?
No.
Not a lot of people are, but I absolutely love the gypsy scene in Stoneflower. That is probably my favorite thing that I have ever danced my entire life. That is, just go watch it. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. I'm going to get off of this call and go on YouTube and look it up, and everybody else should too. It sounds amazing. That's awesome. And then also, is there a favorite place that you have, a favorite city or, any place that you've had a chance to visit or dance in?
Oh gosh. Um, so I'm going to say two, but one is sentimental because it was the first place on the first tour that I ever went to. So Alençon, France. I shout out. It was the first, like I said, it was the first stop that we made on tour. And it was my first time ever being anywhere. And they were just so beautifully gracious and wonderful hosts and beautiful people. I mean, couldn't have asked for a better environment to dance in. So it was so thrilling to be there. And then the other one, I just was shocked. I was just shocked. One of our tours went through Varna, Bulgaria, which if anybody knows out there, Varna is like the stage where they have one of the largest international ballet competitions in the world. And we got to dance on the Varna stage.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
Where we were was actually, where we were performing was actually that theater where the international ballet competition was. And I think I left floating. I was like, I can't believe I actually have danced on that stage. That is crazy. And never in my life did I think that I would dance on that stage.
Yeah, that's amazing. What a cool experience. That's awesome. And Bulgaria is beautiful as well. So,
so beautiful, so beautiful. But Veliko Trnovo is probably my favorite city in Bulgaria. Love you, Bulgaria.
love you. That's awesome. And then what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received in your career?
It's not a fun one. It's not a fun one for me to hear. It's not a fun one for anybody to hear. And I know my students hate it when I tell them this. Be patient.
Mm-hmm.
Be patient. There is no fast forward button for ballet. There is no way to make the body do what it's going to do before it's ready to do it. It is meticulous. The training is meticulous, and it is so slow. It is so slow when it's done in a way with an eye to building dancers, not recreationally necessarily, but seriously. It is so slow because you want to avoid injury. You want to make sure all the materials in their bodies in the correct way. And so you really have to take your time. And that can be the hardest thing for students. It was the hardest thing for me. There is no ADHD person in the face of the world who doesn't want to race to the next thing. And so the constant, you have to be you have to be patient, you have to give yourself time was the hardest thing. But as a teacher, I see it everywhere. And all I can say is there's no fast forward button. So give yourself some grace. It will come. But you can't, the more that you compare yourselves to other people, the more that you look on social media and think to yourself, oh, I should be. Should is probably the worst word in the world.
Yeah.
There are no shoulds. Give yourself some time. Acknowledge you need patience to get through this journey. And remember that it's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Be patient. That's such tough but important advice, especially for something like ballet, where you're always going to be learning. You're never going to reach, the pinnacle of.
There's no pinnacle.
Yeah, there's no top. You just keep going up. But yeah, I think that's great advice. Be patient. And, the last question I always ask everyone who comes on is, in a perfect world, what would ballet look like, or what would you want it to be?
Okay. In a perfect world, everyone would have access to solid technique, with teachers who have been taught how to teach and teach well, whether that's through degree programs, mentorships, schools that exist in the world for teaching pedagogy. We would all have access to the knowledge of how to teach. That's on the ballet side, on the technique side. But we would also all have access to teachers who maybe aren't perfect, because we're all human, but have done their very best to train themselves on how to handle social developmental aspects of classroom and studio life, so that our dancers are as healthy mentally as they possibly can.
I hope for that too for ballet. And your answer to that question made me realize I want to correct something I said earlier, because I mentioned that it's so important to find the correct teachers in ballet. And what I meant by that is just the correct teacher for you. I think obviously, there's no perfect teacher. We all make mistakes, but I think finding the person that can work with you best is so important. And I think that you're doing such a great job of that with your students and all of the work that you're doing to open up ballet and make it more accessible. So I just really appreciate you. And, where can people find you if they want to connect with you on social media?
Oh, thank you so much. So the best place to find me is Instagram. It's really where, so Sassy Southern Ballet Mama is really where I do all of my work there. I have a very small Instagram page for education. My bigger page for education is on Facebook, and that's Pivot Teacher Mom. You can get a little snippet of all the things that I talked about today as far as development is concerned if you're interested in that aspect of learning how to teach. That's where I would send people there. But Instagram for ballet, that's the place to go. And I'm really hoping, like I said, I will be done with my directorship on early education at the end of August. That's our last summer camp. And then so come September, I'm really hoping to get my website, really the blog and everything back up and running, and really spend some time working through all of those things. So hopefully come September 2024, start looking on the website as well. And that has some good material there.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, well, I can't wait for that. So many exciting things ahead. And Sassy Southern Ballet Mama, I follow you on Instagram, and everybody should. You have such great content. So I'll link to it in the show notes. But thank you again so much for taking the time to speak with me, especially during your spring break. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
I was so honored to talk to Leigh. She has so much great experience and knowledge to share as a teacher and a former professional dancer. We barely scratched the surface. I wasn't lying when I said I could have talked to her for another hour. She's at Sassy Southern Ballet Mama on Instagram, and she has plenty of videos discussing in detail everything that we talked about here, whether it's dancing with ADHD, MS, mental health for dancers, tips for adults in ballet, you name it. So check it out. And her website, which she says is still a work in progress but will be updated later this year, is sassysouthernballetmama.com. So be sure to check there for updates about everything we discussed, including the adult ballet company she's building with her students. I'll include those links in the show notes. By the way, don't her adult ballet students sound so awesome? I love how much they've expressed what they're looking for out of their ballet education and how hard Leigh has worked to support them. It's my dream that's what every adult ballet classroom will look like. I'm grateful for the work she's doing, and I hope you enjoyed our conversation. We have a mid-month episode publishing on Tuesday, May 21st, so stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, happy dancing, everybody, and see you at the bar.